It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion. Today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Tuesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Bills is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Well, folks, we have a ton of great questions to get into today on the podcast. And with that said, I received a ton of questions. So I'm going to try to get to the most commonly asked about stuff here on the show today. And also do want to let you know that I'm recording this before we hear from Sean McDermott on Monday afternoon. So any updates that he provides in his press conference regarding injuries and that type of stuff, we'll get to next time we speak, because he didn't speak before I recorded today. So I don't have those most latest updates, but we do have a ton to get into. Let's get started. The first one comes from John. John says, what do you think about Gregory Rousseau and what he's done so far that has helped him have the early season success? It's looking like a real steal right now. Yeah, Greg Rousseau's playing great, leading the team in sacks, tackles for loss, pressures, all that stuff. He's playing good football. And what's interesting is if you go back to the conversations that we had about Gregory Rousseau, it was all about what he was going to do in year 2. I didn't think the Bills would get much from him in year 1, and they wound up getting a 17-game starter, some big-time splash plays, right, some big moments, but collectively, you knew that you wanted more from him as a first-round pick. Well, you're getting that now. And we have to be reminded with Gregory Rousseau that this is a player that at the University of Miami played a total of 546 snaps in college on defense. That's it. He had 17 in 2019. The rest came in, 17 in 2018. The rest came in 2019, and then he didn't play at all in 2020. He's only 22 years old right now. He won't turn 23 until after the season. So he's just a young player that's raw, that's still developing, and he's learning how to use his gifts, right? That length, that power, those heavy hands. Has a unique skill set and a lot of untapped potential. You saw it in 2019 at Miami, but applying that to the next level got a little bit challenging, just given that you didn't see him in 2020 and that he hadn't played a ton of football, at least on the defensive side of the football, at defensive line previously. And so I think this is just him maturing as a player, maturing and learning technique. You always count on that big jump from year 1 to year 2, having the influence of Von Miller, getting a chance to play a little bit more in terms of alignments, right? Last year, Greg Rousseau played left defensive end, and that was just about it. Now you're seeing him play on the right side. You're seeing him reduced inside. You're seeing him run stunts with Von Miller, and all of that's playing into how productive he's been early on. And I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can be. But I'm obviously very, very pleased and encouraged with what we've seen from Gregory Rousseau to this point. The next one comes from Nicole, very similar to one sent in by Justin and many others. Nicole says, why do you think the Bills are continuously choosing to not use the run game effectively? Josh Allen was our leading rusher again yesterday. I understand that Josh likes to take matters into his own hands at times, but not utilizing our running backs effectively, coupled with 63 passing attempts, is not sustainable. I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you that you want to be able to run the ball a lot more with your running backs than what the Bills have been able to do through 3 games. And you go back to the Rams game, and I thought the Bills' run game had some good moments, and I really liked the run blocking in that game. And then the next 2 weeks, I feel like there just hadn't been a ton of space to work with. And it's disappointing because this is going to be important. The Bills can't rely solely on throwing the football and solely when they run the football using Devin Singletary. They need to have a more meaningful backfield situation, guys that can help this football team. And I know that they've all kind of had their moments individually. You know, Zach Moss had the explosive run. James Cook had an explosive run against Tennessee. James Cook got a little bit more involved as a receiver against Miami. But collectively, I think it's fair to say that the running back production just isn't there right now. And it's frustrating because you feel like from a scheme perspective that they've made good adjustments. You feel like they have the players to run block. You feel like you have reasonably sound running backs. You run the ball a ton and put a lot of stress on defenses to stop the pass, and you still can't run it. It's frustrating. I wish I had an easy answer for you. It's probably all of it. It's probably scheme, running backs, blocking. There's an all of the above issue here, and I need to dive into the tape. I haven't had a chance to watch the all 22 yet from the Miami game. But in week 1, I thought the run blocking was good. In week 2, I felt like there was a lot of individual losses in terms of what happened up front. Against Miami, I'm not exactly sure at this point without having watched the tape, but I think it's fair to emphasize and be mindful of the need for Buffalo to get more of these running backs going. And I know that they throw the ball well, and passing attempts from Josh Allen matter a ton, right? Those are good plays. But you need more from this rushing offense. You need more. I have zero confidence right now in the Bills running the football in short yardage. Zero confidence. That's not a good place to be. That's not a good place to be. And Devin Singletary is clearly the Bills' best running back, but you need more, right? Like, you can't just put all your eggs in that basket. I love what Devin brings to this offense, but he needs help. He played 63 of the 90 snaps yesterday for the Bills' offense. 63 out of 90. They need more reliable options at running back. They absolutely do. And again, I don't think the lack of production is solely on running backs, but something has to happen here. The Bills have to find themselves a rushing offense that's not just Josh Allen. Justin says, what are your thoughts on the pass rush in this game? Seemed non-existent for not being on the field much. Well, the Dolphins had 21 dropbacks. The Bills had 2 sacks. And then they only generated pressure 6 other times. When Tua was kept clean, he got the ball out quick. 14 of 19 Tua dropbacks, keeping in mind Teddy Bridgewater had 2. When Tua was kept clean, 14 of 19 dropbacks, he got the ball out in 2.26 seconds. That's quick. Getting the ball out quick. And what I think this comes down to for the Bills, and you hear the Bills coaching staff talk about this a lot, whether it's Leslie Frazier or Sean McDermott, marrying the coverage to the rush. They have to complement each other. You need the rush and the coverage to marry up. And that's not as easy to do when you don't have that ability to disguise like you did with Hyde and Poyer. You have to play a lot more straight up with your coverage. And because of that, quarterbacks are able to go more often to their first read. They don't have to exhaust progressions. They don't have to hold on to the ball for as long. And I think the evidence is in Tua on 14 of 19 dropbacks where he was kept clean. He got the ball out in 2.26 seconds because he was able to go where he initially wanted to go with the football. So you need more on the back end to help the front end. And that's what we talk about when we say marry the coverage with the rush. It has to complement and play off of each other. And I think being shorthanded in the secondary took away from the Bills' opportunity to do that more effectively against Miami. That's why that's my big takeaway with this pass rush on Sunday against the Dolphins. Hope you've been getting in on the action over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is my favorite daily fantasy resource. How does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And Prize Picks has everything. It's not just NFL. They've got Major League Baseball, college football, WNBA, soccer, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, you name it, you can find it over at Prize Picks, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So if you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match worth up to $100. The next one comes from Rich, very similar to one sent in by Harry. Rich says, yesterday's game brought back so many feelings similar to after the loss in Kansas City last year. Can't help but think that the coaching staff has not learned how to win and close out close games. Am I wrong to think that McDermott may just be another Marty Schottenheimer or Dan Reeves? Is it worrisome for me to trust McDermott with this much talent given his accumulating history of head-scratching losses? I can't even get myself to come close to being concerned about Coach McDermott and his ability to coach a championship football team. I can't get myself to come close to thinking about that. Now, I think you can simultaneously agree with that, but also acknowledge that lately the Bills have been chaotic in close games. And if you go back to the Kansas City loss, the 13 seconds, go back and listen to that podcast. I put it squarely on McDermott. I said words like, he failed the football team. But from a coaching standpoint in the Miami game, I hated 2 calls. That's it. The defensive alignment on the 3rd and 22 and the sequencing leading to the strip sack that gave Miami a 6-yard field. McDermott didn't miss a field goal. He didn't drop a touchdown. He didn't drop a pick 6. He didn't miss Isaiah McKenzie for a touchdown or anything like that. I think this coaching staff had this team in position to win this game by multiple scores. I put very little fault for Sunday's game on the coaching staff. Very little in my mind. We'll talk a little bit more about the 1-score games and all that here in just a second, but kind of contrasting 13 seconds, what McDermott's done this game, I don't really put myself in that same position at all. But the Bills have to be less chaotic in close games. They have to be able to be more consistent. 0 for their last 7. Remember, they were 5-1 in 2020. 5-1. So that narrative has switched very quickly. Pete says, I'd love to hear what you have to say about Ken Dorsey's booth reaction, since it seems to be a talking point around the league today. Don't usually focus on stuff that happens outside the game, but this is one of those items that feels important. Personally, I'm not mad at Ken Dorsey. That being said, I think it's problematic people start glorifying that, or players throwing tablets, etc., as showing how much they care. It's not. There were probably 100 Bills players and staff at the game who didn't act like that. Does Ken Dorsey care more than them? Not remotely. Dorsey doesn't deserve to be roasted for losing his cool, but it was a bad moment, not something to condone or emulate, nothing more. Yeah, you know what's interesting is I saw it, didn't think anything of it, and then it's one of those things that 12 hours later, it's very important or very big talking point across the landscape of the football community. Like I said, I didn't think much of it. I think it shows that he has a lot of emotion and care, and I know that you kind of spoke down against that in your phrasing of the question. Josh Allen slammed his helmet a bunch of times in that game, a bunch of times. And we just chalk it up to him being a competitor. Dorsey had a lot to be upset about, a lot. All that production, 497 yards, 3 points in the second half. I mean, it's got to be frustrating. It's got to be frustrating. You're down to, you have no more backup offensive linemen. Your receivers aren't fresh enough to run routes. I mean, just imagine that. 62 dropbacks. You got 4 receivers. Jake Kumaro goes down early in that game. You've got 4 receivers. And they got to run routes in that heat? That's tough. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to have 1st and goal from the 2 with Josh Allen as your quarterback and come away with no points with the game on the line. He had a lot to be upset about. And some people are questioning his poise. Like this is somehow like gonna dissuade people from wanting to interview him to be a head coach. I mean, he's in a booth, right? It's not a moment where he expects to have a camera on him. I think even Bill Belichick might go into a room from time to time and lose his mind and scream. This is high stakes football. This is big stuff. This is at the highest level, a lot on the line. He's pissed. He was. You got a chance to see that. We've heard that Dorsey is competitive. He's aggressive. And when things don't go the way you want it to and you feel like you put your players in good position and there's some variables that make it hard for your offense to function, whether that's centers leaving, snap issues, exhaustion, heat. Probably a pretty frustrating afternoon for Mr. Ken Dorsey. So I kind of get it. Would you like more poise? Sure. But, I mean, like I said, he's in a booth. I don't think he's sitting there acting like that, knowing that it's going to be broadcasted to the world and become a major meme in the fallout of the game. Harry says, I know you don't do hot takes, but the little respect I had for Christian Wilkins is now gone. Multiple late hits, dive bombing the pile, and of course, the manhood check on Josh. How should we deal with this guy moving forward? I mean, Christian Wilkins was and has been pretty extra, right? And I think, honestly, all the stuff that you're saying there, the thing that I took the most exception with was on one of the pass rushes, he kicked Josh Allen. He stuck his leg out and kicked him, and that didn't get called. Like, literally was parallel with him. Josh Allen steps up and throws the football, and Christian Wilkins kicks him. That was the most offensive thing that he did. But that's who Wilkins is as a player. He's a pesky player. He wants to get under the skin of his opponents, and that's what he does. That's what he does. Warren Sapp was a little bit like that. Got a little rivalry going here between Josh Allen and Christian Wilkins. I think you just have an awareness to who he is. Don't let him get under your skin. And if you're the offensive lineman going up against him, however many times he's on the field is an opportunity to go after him, right? You got a chance to compete against him. That's a great thing about football is you can legally go after people and not get arrested. So got some chances there, some double teams to finish him. I mean, you play aggressive right back at him. The next one comes from Ernie, who says, was wondering if you could give your thoughts on Tua coming back into the game. Personally, I don't think he should have. I'm not a doctor. I would have even preferred Josh not coming back if that happened to the Bills. I'm glad the league is looking into it. I mean, it's tough to really comment on this. I mean, it certainly looked like he had a head injury. He didn't tuck his chin when he fell back after the Milano hit or the Milano push. He didn't tuck his chin. His head bounces off the ground, and he's wobbly afterwards for several seconds, and then even reports that he was wobbly walking back into the locker room. Certainly looked like a head injury to me. He was reported as a head injury. And the NFL is going to investigate this, and we'll get the answer. We'll find out. But for all the emphasis on player safety and concussions and all that type of stuff, you would hate for this to be an example of a team putting a player back out on the field when they were concussed. So I honestly hope that he had a back injury like they've been talking about, and he was good to play. So it's tough for me to comment on it. It looked like a head injury to me. It looked concerning. Comes back as a back injury. He's fine the rest of the way. I think it's fair to ask questions, and we'll get the answer. Him coming back in the game is not why the Bills lost. Bills lost because they scored 3 points in the second half and ran 50 plays in the second half. First and goal from the 2 and didn't get any points. Dropped touchdown pass, missed Isaiah McKenzie. That's why the Bills lost. The next question comes from Jake, who says, this question has been on my mind for years, and it's definitely not brought up only because of yesterday's game. How is the NFL allowing Miami to build a stadium in which the home sideline gets shade the entire game for 1 p.m. games, whereas the visiting sideline is in the sun for the entire game? When playing games in cold weather cities, each team has to deal with the conditions equally. It's not like only the home team has heaters. Both teams have heaters. But in Miami, the home team gets an automatic advantage. And I could get it if each team had a half with the shaded sideline, but the home team gets the shaded sideline the entire game. Yeah, I mean, this is a big advantage that Miami has. That stadium's been there since 1987, if I'm not mistaken. And it's the way it's always been. You play 1 o'clock in Miami, you get baked for the entire game. So it's tough. It's tough. And I know that there's a lot of conversation about that coming out of this game. And I understand what people are saying about safety concerns, heat illness, potentially a fatality. Like, I get that. That's all very real. It's all very real. I get that. But they're still scheduling games for you to play at 1 o'clock in September in Miami, right? That still happens. It's happened the last 3 years for the Bills. The Bills played there last year. The weather was exactly the same. The Bills won 35-0. Not a whole lot of conversation about the weather. The Bills go out there. They're shorthanded. Guys are dropping like flies. Guys can't run routes. Offensive linemen are exhausted. You're losing guys left and right. You run 90 plays on offense, and you can't function by the end of the game. I don't know what the answer is here, but I can tell you that it shouldn't have been to anyone's surprise that it was hot in Miami in September and you have to sit out in the sun, because it's been going that way since 1987, at least when that stadium was built. So I'm not exactly sure like what the right thing is here, but that's a big advantage that Miami has. And so if there's a safety concern and you shouldn't have 1 o'clock games in Miami in September, I get it, but that's the way it is right now. And that's something we talked when the schedule came out. Go back and listen to the podcast, whenever that was, April. I said it's going to be hot. It's a short weekend. It's going to be hot in Miami. It was a concern that I had that the Bills would be able to win the game, and obviously had a big effect on the game. I'm not trying to take that away, but this is how it's, I mean, the Dolphins play a couple of home games every year in September, and lately the Bills have had, or the NFL has had the Bills coming to their place in September and sending Miami to Buffalo in December. So you have somewhat of a chance to return the favor, but I mean, yeah, if there's health concerns and all that type of stuff, there's a bigger conversation to be had. So we'll see where this all goes, but everybody knew it was going to be hot, humid, and tough, and there's no way to prepare for it. You hear Josh Allen talking after the game, said it was hard to breathe. The guy played 90 snaps, right? And he's running around like crazy. It's tough. Spencer Brown, how long did he last? A quarter and a half, something like that? There's no way to prepare for it. It's a real advantage that Miami has. But there's, I mean, like I said, though, there's football played there. Even college games, they play at noon. University of Miami plays at noon in the same stadium. So, I don't know. I've never really seen this much conversation about it in terms of it, a change being needed. But I've also never seen a team quite melt down, you know what I mean, because of the heat, like I saw the Bills on Sunday. Certainly a big talking point coming out of this game. Next one comes from Ed, who says, with the secondary being banged up and depleted, how does Siran Neal still not have a role in the defense? I found myself asking this a couple of years ago, and there's got to be a reason. Like, I know he's a valuable special teams player, but he doesn't get much run on defense. I'm guessing that's for a reason. And you could love Sean McDermott, you could not love him, whatever you feel about him. I think most people love him and respect what he's been able to get done in Buffalo. But this guy knows defense. He knows defensive backs. I mean, he's gotten insane production out of players that never produced before in their NFL career. I got a feeling he knows exactly what Siran Neal and what he isn't. I mean, the fact that Jamarcus Ingram, a UDFA out of Buffalo from the practice squad, went in that corner over Siran Neal tells you what you need to know. And I'm not always this guy that says, well, the team is not is above making a mistake and they could misread their personnel. I think you can maybe apply Ryan Bates to that and say, well, why didn't Ryan Bates play sooner if he's this good of a guard? But I don't find myself going there with Siran Neal because he's had opportunity on defense. And as his career elongates, those opportunities go less and less on defense, so much so that we have a situation like what happened on Sunday, and he's not even a thought for the defense. So there's got to be a reason. Cameron says, I was listening to Howard and Jeremy on WGR today. And folks, by the way, I'm on WGR every single Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. Have a built-in segment there. So if you want to hear me talk to Howard and Jeremy and Joe DiBiase, all the fine hosts over there at WGR, I'm on every single Wednesday at 8 a.m. But Cameron says, I was listening to Howard and Jeremy Jeremy said that he will not be convinced by anyone that going 0-7 in the last 7 one-score games is a problem at all because it's choosing a sample size to fit the narrative that the Bills need to fix something. He said to look at it objectively, you shouldn't take into account all the one-score games. He said that you should take into account all the one-score games in the Josh Allen era, not to mention that over the last one-score losses, there have been some crazy circumstances. The PI no call on Diggs, the Bucs game, Josh slipping against the Titans, wild windstorm against the Patriots, 13 seconds, etc. Wondering if you have any thoughts on that. Well, this is part of why I led with what I did yesterday on the podcast, because I've tended to agree with Jeremy. I was that person, honestly, right up until before this game, where I've been pretty dismissive of this talking point. And I've said, look, they were 5-1 in 2020. There's a bigger sample size here. And you could point to something in those games that was pretty crazy that led to a loss. 7 in a row. It's 0-7. And the one thing that is pretty common in all of those games is that there's been some chaotic moments. And so I'm willing to acknowledge this as a trend. I'm willing to acknowledge this as a concern. I'm not sure that there's a B, C, D, E, F, G, do these things and you'll have better success in one-score games. I think it just comes down to playing better complementary football. That's what I chalked up the Miami loss to. That's why I went through what I went through on the podcast yesterday. You have to play better, smart, complementary football in those situations. And maybe it's just an example of when the Bills don't do that, the games are tighter and they aren't winning them. But there's a lot baked into it. I don't think it's as simple as saying the Bills can't win close games, because they can. They've proven they can. But, man, you've got a really concerning trend here. And like I said, I was dismissive of this until this Miami game. But it's too big of a sample size now in the other direction. If it was 3 or 4 games in a row, okay. 7. And there's chaos tied to seemingly all 7 of them. I want to close on this one from Pat, because I think this is a good way to kind of tie a ribbon on this Dolphins loss and kind of shift our focus towards the Baltimore Ravens, which we're going to do tomorrow with our primer. Pat says, I know it stings, but long-term, I am so optimistic about this team. The fact that they totaled 500 yards of offense and 40 minutes of possession and held the high-flying offense of Miami as well as they did with the personnel that was on the team is a testament to the will and determination our team possesses. There's no excuse for the loss and no moral victories. But as Bruce Nolan states, the how and why are more important than the what. The what in this instance is that Miami had more points in the scoreboard than the Bills. The how and the why show us the win was not sustainable from the Dolphins and that the loss was not sustainable for the Bills. They aren't going to play like this and lose very often. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. We've figured out why the Bills lost this game. And 99 times out of 100, you win this football game, and you win it by multiple scores. There's some variables that were tough. The heat, the injuries, some officiating that didn't go the Bills' way. But kind of like what I said at the end of yesterday's podcast, it's week 3. The Bills are 2-1. Everything they want to achieve is right in front of them. Now, they got to get healthy for sure. Got to get healthy. But at the end of the day, it's week 3. Let's play them all and see what happens. I like what we got. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, our comprehensive primer. We're going to get ready for the Baltimore Ravens from every angle. So come on back. Don't miss it. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.